Thank you for joining us for our Sunday School lesson for this morning, April 23rd, 2023. Our lesson this morning is entitled Jesus Reinstates Peter. Jesus Reinstates Peter. And our lesson is continuing with John, the 21st chapter, verses 15 through 19. Before we read those verses, let's have a little recap. Last week's lesson was entitled Jesus Cooks Breakfast, and it talked about how when the disciples were out on the seashore and Peter said, let's go fishing. And they had fished all night, and some of the other disciples went along with them, but they caught nothing. And then Jesus was on the seaside, and he was watching them as they were fishing. And then he yelled out to them, have you caught any fish? And they yelled back, no, we've not caught anything. So then he said, cast your nets on the right side of the boat. And when they did it, they caught more fish than their nets could hold, even though the nets did not break. And as they caught the fish, John, the beloved disciple, realized it was Jesus. And he told Peter, it's Jesus. And Peter jumped out of the boat and swam towards the shore. And the other disciples rowed the boat towards the shore. And when they got to the shore, Jesus said, let's cook some fish. So he cooked fish and he served them. He still had his servant spirit. Then we see today's lesson picks up with that same thing on verse 15 of chapter 21. And it reads, so when they had dined, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, lovest thou me more than these? He said unto him, yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said unto him, feed my lambs. He said to him again the second time, Simon, son of Jonah, lovest thou me? He said unto him, yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said unto him, feed my sheep. He said unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved because he said it unto him the third time, lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus said unto him, feed my sheep. Verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself, and walkest whither thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hand, and another shall gird thee, and carry thee whither thou wouldst not. This spake he, signifying by what death he should glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said unto him, follow me. Now this lesson can be seen on several levels. When we first look at this, we see that there's eating with Jesus, and then Jesus looks specifically, he singles Peter out. He says, do you love me, Peter? And Peter says, yes, Lord, you know I do. Now think about it. When Peter first heard this question, I'm almost sure that he remembered what had happened a few weeks earlier with the crucifixion, when the Lord had told him that he would deny him, and Peter had said, no, Lord, I will never deny you. Then Peter realized that he did. So I'm thinking when Jesus first asked him, by Peter being human just like us, he thought that the Lord was upset with him when he asked him, do you love me? And then he says, yes, I do love you. Then Jesus said unto him, feed my lambs. Now, if you think of lambs, you think of little children, the little ones of the sheep that need nurturing, that needs that special careful attention. So we see here that he's given Peter the authority to feed his little ones. But then we see in the 16th verse, Jesus says it the second time unto Simon. He says, do you love me? And Simon Peter says, yes, Father, yes, Lord, I love you. Then Jesus said unto him, feed my sheep. This is another furtherance of the ministry. He's not only asking him to feed the little ones, the new converts, but the sheep are the older ones, the adult of the species. And he's telling him to feed my sheep. So he's kind of warning him that in this mission that he's about to take on, as a representative of him, he's going to have to deal with people too. He's going to have to help those that are lost, be they little ones or adults, that he's going to have to help them see the way of Christ and get to know the Savior called Jesus. And then in the 7th verse, he said unto him a third time, Simon, son of Jonah, lovest thou me? And then Peter was so grieved because he said unto the Lord the third time, lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said unto him again, Feed my sheep. We see that Peter was starting to get upset because he probably felt that Jesus didn't believe him. But then he said unto him, when he answered, I love you, he said, But Lord, you know that I love you. You know all things, so you know that I do love you. So Jesus told him, Feed my sheep. So we see here that he's given Peter the authority to take on this mission, to carry on his works. And then he went on to tell him that when he was young, and he was using an example of everybody, when you're young and strong, you go where you want to go. You put your own clothes on and you choose where you want to go, when you want to go, and how you want to go. But he told him that there will come a time as you age that you don't carry your own self, that you don't project, and you're not able to go where you want to go, when you want to go. So then he says, as you age, when you somebody else will dress you, somebody else will take you by your hand and lead you where you will go. And then he said in that 19th verse that when he told him that it was signifying the type of death that he would die in order to glorify God. Now remember, Jesus had been crucified, but he was sort of giving Peter an advance notice of what to expect. And we do know that Peter himself also was crucified, but he lived a long time, and he did a mighty work in establishing the church after the Christ ascended back to heaven. But we see here that Jesus has a forgiving spirit. And because he does know all things, he's telling us that regardless of how sometimes we may have felt betrayed, that we still have to give people that opportunity to improve and be a better person. And he had the same love for Peter. His love was not diminished because of Peter's poor choices. His love was not diminished because of Peter's mistake. But we see here, Peter was still man enough to admit that he was wrong. And he was not ashamed to let the Lord, Father, I do love you. I do love you. And he answered the question every time, even though he was becoming sick in spirit, because he wanted Jesus to know that I do love you. And Jesus gave him work to do, and he gave him the authority to do it with. So this week's lesson, entitled Jesus Reinstates Peter, lets us know that even with our rising and falling, the Lord still gives us an opportunity to serve. See you next week.